welcome to the deep dive. You're here, I think, because you want to get the big picture, understand what's really going on, but, without getting totally swamped in details.
Exactly, and that's what we aim for.
So today, we're zoning in on philanthropy. We're looking at the major trends, the shifts in strategy, and some of the really vital discussions shaping how giving happens right now.
Think of this as your, streamlined guide. We've pulled together info from lots of places, new reports, articles, news, trying to give you the essentials without the overload.
We want it to be clear, engaging, really get to the heart of it.
And we'll cover a few key areas to hopefully paint a pretty comprehensive picture.
Okay, sounds good. So what's on the list?
Well, first, there's this real rise in collective giving, people pooling their resources.
Right, then?
Then we'll look at nonprofits and lobbying. They're getting more involved in shaping policy.
Interesting, okay.
We're also seeing this trend, foundations choosing to spend down their money, not last forever.
That is interesting, a different approach.
Yeah. And then how philanthropy is dealing with the U.S. population getting older, a big demographic shift.
I ignore that one.
Definitely not. Plus, the challenges facing the people who actually work in nonprofits. Burnout, vacancies. It's tough.
Yeah, hearing a lot about that.
And finally, we'll touch on Bill Gates, his philanthropy, where it's headed, his big plans.
Okay, quite a bit to cover. Let's dive in, maybe starting with that collective giving piece.
Perfect. Yeah, there's definitely momentum there. Some 2024 research really highlights the growth in these giving circles in the U.S. We're talking between 2017 and 2023.
Okay, so what kind of numbers are we seeing?
It's pretty significant. Nearly 4,000 groups, about 370,000 people involved.
Wow.
And they've donated over $3.1 billion together.
$3.1 billion, that's substantial.
It is. And what's really striking is the growth rate. Since 2017, participation and the money donated both up over 140%.
140% in just 6 years.
Yeah. It really suggests, a shift towards maybe more democratic community-level philanthropy.
It makes you think about people wanting more direct control over their giving, doesn't it? Like grassroots power.
Absolutely. And who's driving this? It's largely women.
Ah, okay. Tell me more about that.
Well, the stats show a really consistent, growing majority of women in these circles. Back in 2006, it was already significant. By 2016, even more so.
And now, in 2023?
By 2023, 60% of these giving groups were entirely women.
60%. All women.
Yep. And 84% of all groups reported that women made up more than half their members.
That's a powerful trend. Any idea why women are so central to this? Is it the causes, the approach?
The research hints at a few things. There's this great testimonial from a woman named Melissa Walker. She talked about her giving circle, how it gave her this sense of power, of impact that she hadn't felt giving alone.
That makes sense. The collective power.
Exactly. That idea of collective efficacy. Your bit, combined with others, really makes a difference. It connects to that aha moment you look for, seeing your pooled money actually do something tangible in the community.
Right. Real-world impact. Okay, so moving from collective giving, let's talk about the nonprofit voice in policy, lobbying.
Yeah, another area where we're seeing growth. It might surprise some people, actually, how much public charities are engaging in lobbying now.
How much has it increased?
Well, research by Falk and others shows that the number of designated lobbying public charities went up from about 18,500 in 2003 to over 10,200 in 2023.
Okay, so a noticeable increase.
But maybe more telling, of the nonprofits that were around in both 2003 and 2023, 38% started lobbying during that time.
38% started. Wow.
Yeah. And overall, something like 72% of the charities lobbying now only started doing it in the last 20 years.
That feels like a significant shift in strategy for the sector. But I remember reading somewhere, is it easy for them to report this activity? Do the numbers capture everything?
That's a really important point. There was work by Prentice back in 2018 highlighting how complex it is to report lobbying on the Form 990.
The main tax form for nonprofits.
Exactly. Reporting lobbying on it, it's not straightforward. Needs specific legal accounting know-how reported in different places. So, yeah, it's quite possible the actual number of nonprofits lobbying is higher than what's officially reported.
So the real number might be even bigger. Yeah. But even with the reported numbers, when they do lobby effectively, it can have a massive impact, right? Like with the Paycheck Protection Program during COVID.
Oh, absolutely. That's a prime example. Think back to the start of the pandemic. You had these major philanthropic players, the big five, essentially.
Like Ford, Kellogg, those types.
Exactly, those kinds of influential foundations. They successfully advocated to make sure nonprofits that got Medicaid funding were also eligible for PPP loans.
Which was crucial for keeping staff employed.
Totally. That single lobbying effort is credited with saving, get this, 4.1 million nonprofit jobs in 2020 alone.
4.1 million jobs. That's system-level change right
It
there.
really is, and it's not just happening at the federal level.
See, it happens too.
Yep. We saw state examples. Michigan Nonprofit Association, they secured $35 million in state recovery funds.
Okay.
And the Kentucky Nonprofit Network got $75 million of those same funds. SLFRF, they call them.
State and local fiscal recovery funds.
Right. So these examples really drive home the point. When nonprofits understand how to legally advocate, they can genuinely influence policy and bring back resources for their communities. It's about empowerment.
Okay, this next one. I find this really fascinating. Foundations deciding not to exist forever, choosing to spend down their money.
Yeah, it is a major departure from the traditional model, isn't it? The perpetual foundation.
Definitely.
There's that quote from Bill Feeney, something about the joy of giving while you're still around to see it. It captures this changing mindset.
So more foundations are saying, let's set an end date.
Pretty much. Planning their lifespan, deciding to get the assets out the door more actively, often faster. It might signal, a more urgent approach to tackling problems now.
What are the trade-offs there, though, for the foundation, for the grantees?
That's the key question. Are there specific examples we can point to?
Yeah, who's actually doing this?
Well, some have already closed up shop. The Whitman Institute finished in 2022.
Quite.
The WEM Foundation and the Coors Foundation both stopped grant-making in 2023.
And others planning to.
Yeah, several well-known ones have announced spend-down plans. Levitt, Compton, Stoopski, the Ivy Foundation.
The Ivy Foundation. I remember their reasoning was interesting.
It was. They basically questioned why they should exist for perpetuity's sake, arguing the money could do more good tackling today's critical issues.
So for the nonprofits getting their grants, what does this actually mean? Just more money faster?
Often, yes. A spend down usually means ramping up the grant making quite a bit. They have to get through the assets in time.
And is this becoming more common?
Seems so. The National Center on Family Philanthropy found the number of family foundations actively spending down went from 9% to 13% in just 5 years.
That's a notable jump.
And maybe even more telling, over 28% are now considering it.
Wow. 28%. So are there different ways foundations go about this sunsetting process?
Yeah, researchers Hengevos and von Schnurbein identified a couple of main approaches. One is more resource-based, focused on the money and the timeline.
Okay.
The other is more of a needs assessment view, trying to be really responsive to what beneficiaries need as things evolve.
But it's not always smooth sailing, I imagine.
No, definitely not. One criticism you hear is when foundations close down too suddenly without giving their grantees enough lead time to find other funding. That can cause real problems.
Yeah, you could destabilize the very groups you wanted to help.
Exactly. But on the flip side, that urgency can lead to some really transformative grants. Like the WEM Foundation, as they were closing, they made some huge final gifts, allowing organizations to make major investments they couldn't have otherwise.
Big bets on the way out. Okay, let's shift again. A huge societal trend. America getting older. How's philanthropy responding?
It's a massive demographic shift, no doubt about it. The median age keeps ticking up, and the Census Bureau projected back in 2018 that by 2034...
Just a decade away.
Right. Adults 65 and older will actually outnumber kids under 18 for the first time ever in the U.S.
That changes, well, everything.
Okay.
Including where charitable dollars might be needed most.
Absolutely. And we are seeing philanthropy pay more attention.
Is the funding following the demographic shift?
It seems to be. An analysis by the Johnson Center found a huge jump, 225% increase in the number of grant makers funding nonprofits that support older adults. That was between 2012 and 2022.
225% increase in funders. Okay, what's driving that focus?
Several things seem to be converging. The Older Americans Act, its 60th anniversary, and reauthorization brought attention.
Okay.
There's also a shift in thinking about caregiving, funding for it. You see reports like the Ford Foundation's The Price We Pay and the government's national strategy to support family caregivers.
So caregiving is getting more focus.
And the whole conversation around aging is changing too, partly thanks to groups like the National Center to Reframe Aging, trying to create a more positive view.
That's good to hear. But what are the practical challenges this aging trend brings for nonprofits and funders?
Well, one big one is volunteering. Older adults have traditionally been a huge volunteer base.
Right.
But since the pandemic, there's been a noticeable drop in their volunteer rates.
So nonprofits need to rethink how they get things done, find other sources of labor.
Exactly. It forces a rethink of their workforce models. We're also seeing regional differences. The older population isn't growing at the same rate everywhere, and the grant funding isn't either. So strategies need to be localized.
Makes sense.
And then there are related issues like the retirement crisis, which affects older adults' financial security, and even things like accelerated aging among people who are incarcerated. It's all interconnected.
Definitely complex.
Which actually leads us nicely into the next topic. The challenges facing the nonprofit workforce itself. Hearing a lot about stress, shortages. Yeah, it's a genuine crisis for the sector right now. A 2023 survey from the National Council of Nonprofits, it found nearly 75% of nonprofits had ongoing job vacancies.
3/4. That's crippling.
It severely impacts their ability to deliver services. And it's ironic because for the decade before 2017, nonprofit employment actually grew faster than the for-profit sector.
So it wasn't always like this. What's causing the strain now? Is it just finding people?
Recruitment's part of it, but a huge piece is financial hardship for the employees.
You mean low pay?
Pretty much. Data from Independent Sector and United for Alice in 2024 showed that 22% of nonprofit employees lived in households that couldn't afford basic necessities.
1 in 5 nonprofit workers struggling to make ends meet. That's deeply concerning.
It really is. The people providing social services often need support themselves, and this hits workers from racial and ethnic minority groups harder, too.
Is there awareness of this among the foundations funding these nonprofits?
That's the disconnect. Research from the Center for Effective Philanthropy suggests foundation leaders are worried about staff burnout at their grantees. They say they're concerned. But there seems to be a gap between that concern and actually changing funding practices to support staff well-being. Money, or lack of it, is always cited as the big barrier.
So talk is cheap, basically.
Well, perhaps, though we are seeing some hopeful initiatives like the McGregor Fund's Rest and Liberation Initiative that specifically helps BIPOC-led nonprofits address staff well-being.
Okay, that's positive.
And there's the Mindful Philanthropy Collaborative, where funders are trying to focus more investment on mental health in the sector. But it's clear these are still relatively small efforts compared to the scale of the problem. More needs to happen systemically.
Right, needs systemic change. Okay, finally, let's talk about Bill Gates, one of the biggest names, obviously. What's the latest with his philanthropy? Sounds like there's a shift happening there, too.
There is. He made a pretty major announcement recently. His plan is to give away basically all of his wealth by 2045.
By 2045. All of it.
Virtually all of it, yeah. And that includes committing another $200 billion from the Gates Foundation over the next 20 years.
$200 billion more. That's hard to even comprehend. Where's the focus? Still global health?
Primarily, yes. Global health and education remain central. The goal is incredibly ambitious, saving tens of millions of lives from diseases like HIV, malaria, particularly focusing on women and children.
What's behind the accelerated timeline? Why give it away relatively quickly, by 2045?
He's spoken about wanting to see the impact during his lifetime, but also he's expressed real concern about potential backsliding, especially in childhood survival rates, because of cuts to foreign aid by the U.S. and other countries.
Oh, the aid cuts. He's been vocal about that, hasn't he?
Very. He often points to a 2023 UNICEF report and his own projections suggesting aid cuts could reverse years of progress, leading to more kids dying.
And he argues for maintaining U.S. aid levels.
Consistently. He argues for keeping it around 1% of the federal budget, emphasizing how cost-effective it is, its strategic value for stability, preventing health crises.
I remember hearing he even talked to President Trump about it.
He did. He mentioned discussing polio and HIV programs specifically, and then expressed disappointment when some budgets were cut later.
So the Gates Foundation itself, it's been around a while now.
25 years, yeah. They just had their anniversary.
What are the big achievements they point to, and what are the main goals going forward?
Well, looking back, they highlight their role in things like Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, TB, and malaria, and huge contributions to polio eradication efforts.
Major global health initiatives.
Definitely. Looking ahead, the next 20 years, the big goals are things like ending preventable deaths of mothers and children, wiping out certain deadly infectious diseases, and boosting education to help more countries prosper.
And he also has those separate investments in energy.
Right. Through breakthrough energy and TerraPower, focused on affordable, clean energy. And the interesting part there is any profits from those ventures are supposed to be plowed back into the foundation's philanthropy.
A sort of circular funding model. Still, for goals that big, they can't do it alone,
Right.
even with billions.
No, absolutely not. He stresses the need for government partnerships, especially now with those aid budgets being squeezed. That makes achieving the goals tougher.
Are there criticisms or complexities around the Gates Foundation's work? Such a huge player must attract scrutiny.
Oh, for sure. An organization that big with that much influence, it inevitably faces questions. Lindsay McGowie's book, for example, raised points about the power dynamics and potential unintended consequences of such concentrated philanthropy.
Right.
And there have been specific controversies, like around funding related to abortion, and though the foundation has clarified its stance there, it's complex territory.
But the plan is still to ramp up spending.
Yes. They've announced a plan to increase their annual payout to $9 billion by 2026. So a significant acceleration is definitely underway.
Okay. So, wrapping things up, we've covered a lot. Collective giving taking off, nonprofits finding their voice in lobbying,
Foundations making strategic choices about their lifespan, philanthropy adapting to the aging population.
the very real workforce crisis in the nonprofit sector, and then these huge future plans from the Gates Foundation. It's definitely a dynamic picture.
It really shows a sector in flux, doesn't it? You see innovation, adaptation, the collective action piece, the advocacy. It points towards people wanting more systemic change.
And the spend down trend suggests a focus on maybe more immediate impact.
Right. And then grappling with these big demographic and workforce issues shows the need for resilience, sustainability. And Gates, well, that's philanthropy operating at a global scale, tackling enormous challenges.
Certainly gives you those aha moments thinking about the scale of these changes. So maybe a final thought for you, our listener, to mull over.
Yeah.
With philanthropy evolving like this, more collective action, stronger advocacy, huge resources being deployed strategically, sometimes with an end date in mind, how might all this change how we tackle big societal problems in the years ahead?
And maybe what's the role for individuals, for you, within these larger movements and shifts? Where do you fit in trying to make a difference?
Exactly. Something to think about as this landscape continues to change.
A critical question indeed. Lots to consider.